Hello students, let's look at theme 2 chapter 3 an empire across three continents. Let's go through this chapter very quickly and look at the possible objective type questions that can come from this chapter. When did the Iranians establish control over the Assyrian Empire? In the 6th century BCE. What kind of trades networks developed? The trade networks were overland as well as along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. Which were the city-states in Greece? Athens and Sparta. Now this could be a little bit about Alexander. So you could get many questions from here. Who was the ruler of the kingdom of Macedon? It was Alexander. Which century did he rule in? In the late 4th century BCE. And which states did he belong to? He belonged to the Greek states. Which parts did he conquer? He conquered North Africa, West Asia and Iran, and he reached up to Bias. When did his troops retreat? They retreated when they reached Bias, and many of the Greeks, they stayed behind. What is the Hellenistic culture? So during Alexander's control, the ideals and cultural traditions shared amongst the Greeks and the local population becomes part of the Hellenistic culture, and Greek was the well-known language throughout. Which is this period of the Hellenistic period? 3 centuries after Alexander's death. Why is Rome called a republic? Because its government was based on a system wherein there was election, a system of election. How was the Roman Empire under Julius Caesar? So Julius Caesar was a highborn military commander, and under his reign, the Roman Empire extended to what is today present-day Britain and Germany. Which were the languages spoken in the Roman Empire? So Latin was spoken in Rome. It was the main language of the empire. And in other areas, especially in the east, Greek was the language that was used. How did Christianization of the Roman Empire come about? It happened when Emperor Constantine became a Christian, and this happened in the 4th century CE. How was the Roman Empire divided? It was divided into eastern and western halves, and this was done to make the government easier. Which were the tribes in the frontier areas? The Goths, Visigoths, Vandals and others. This could be a picture-based question. The ruins of Greek city of Corinth. What is the Holy Roman Empire? The Holy Roman Empire was formed from the kingdoms which were under what can be said as the Christian Church. And this happened from the 9th century CE. When did the Arab Empire take over? The Arab Empire took over between the 7th century and the 15th century, and almost all lands of the Eastern Roman Empire were taken over by the Arabs. Who were the Mongols? The last of the people to control the fallen Roman Empire were the Mongols, and this was under Genghis Khan and his successors. They moved into West Asia, Europe, Central Asia, and China, and this happened in the 13th century. This could be a picture-based question. It's the Great Mosque in Damascus, and it was completed in 714. Why were the empires? What were the causes of the instability of the empires? This was because of the conflicts and disputes over resources in the various regions, and it was also due to the crisis that developed between the empires and the pastoral peoples of the north. Let's look at an empire across 3 continents. Which was this empire? It was the Roman Empire. Which were the sources that tell us about this Roman Empire? We have texts, documents, and material remains. You will need to know which are the textual sources, and these were basically the annals, and the narratives were written on a yearly basis. There was letters, speeches, sermons, laws, and so on. There were also documents, and this included inscriptions and papyri. These were usually cut on stone. The inscriptions were cut on stone, so a large number still survive in both Greek and Latin. And the ones that were written on papyri. Papyri is a reed-like plant that grew along the banks of the river Nile in Egypt, and it was widely used as writing paper. Which were the 2 powerful empires that ruled over most of Europe, North Africa, and Middle East in the period between the birth of Christ and the early part of the 7th century, right up to the 630s? It was the Roman and the Iranian Empire. What separated the 2 empires? The river Euphrates. What's the extent and the boundaries of the Roman Empire? And if you look at the map, you will see the boundaries, the rivers, the seas, the cities, and the continents. You will need to know the continents. So we have here to the north, to the south, which places were controlled by Iran. So the whole area of south of the Caspian Sea right up to eastern Arabia, and sometimes even a large part of Afghanistan. Which were the 2 phases of the Roman Empire? It was early and late, and this was divided by the 3rd century. Now the differences between the Roman Empire as well as the Iranian Empire. All these are the differences. So you will see this is for Roman. They were much more diverse. Then you have there was a mosaic of territories and cultures that were bound together by a common system of government, and their major languages were Latin and Greek. On the other hand, the Iranian Empire, you had the Parthians, then later on it was the Sassanians. These dynasties ruled Iran in this period, and the population was largely Iranian, but the Roman Empire had a mixture of population as well as languages. Okay, so what is a republic? This is a Senate source-based question. What is the Principate? Okay, the regime established by Augustus, who was the first emperor in 27 BCE. What's the Senate? It's a body which controlled Rome earlier, okay, when it was a republic. What did the Senate have? Who controlled it? The aristocracy, that is the wealthiest families of Roman and later Italian descent. Mainly these were landowners. Which were the three institutions? You had the emperor, you had the Senate, and the third very important institution was the army. So why is 69 CE called the notorious year? Because it's when four emperors mounted the throne in quick succession. Okay, what is unique about Tiberius? He was second in the long line of Roman emperors, but he was not the natural son of Augustus. That is unique. Why is the Augustan age called, the age of peace? Because it assured peace after decades of internal strife and centuries of military conquest. Emperor Trajan's dream could be a source-based question. Now, what is this importance of gold and silver? So we have here Herod's kingdom. It yielded an equivalent of 5.4 million denarii per year, which was equal to 125,000 kgs of gold. And the denarius was a Roman silver coin containing 4.5 grams of pure silver. Which were the urban centers that lined the shores of the Mediterranean? You had Carthage, Alexandria, and Antioch. Another picture-based question. Pont du Gard in France, and this was the massive aqueducts that carried water. Gallienus versus the Senate. Emperor Gallienus, he forbade the senators from serving in the army or having any access to it so that he could prevent the control of the empire from falling into their hands. And his reign was from 253 to 68. Dr. Galen and how Roman cities treated the countryside. This is a source-based question. A picture-based or a source-based question on the public baths. The 3rd century crisis could come as a source-based question. Okay, what was the rapid succession of emperors? When did this happen? It happened in the 3rd century. There were 25 emperors who succeeded each other in 47 years. Okay, this mention about the bishop of the North African city of Hippo, Saint Augustine, and he was a very towering figure in the intellectual history of the church at a time when bishops were very important religious figures. The graffiti that was found, this could be a source-based as well as a picture-based question at Pompeii. What kind of infrastructure was available in the empire? They had harbors, mines, quarries, brickyards, olive oil factories, etc. Now, wheat, wine, and olive oils. These were imports from which countries? From Spain, the Gallic provinces, North Africa, Egypt, and to a lesser extent, Italy. What were amphorae? They were containers that were used to transport liquids like wine and olive oil. On the treatment of slaves, this could be a source-based question. During the reign of Nero, we have a mention of slave breeding. This was written by one historian. And what is slave breeding? It's the practice of encouraging female slaves and their partners to have more children who would then be slaves. The next is a picture-based or source-based question. It's a mosaic at Churchill in Algeria. This is the picture. What is frankincense? It's an aromatic resin used in incense and perfumes. What was the Jewish revolt of 66 CE? It was a rebellion in Judea against Roman domination. Okay, it's also called the Jewish War. Which were the social groups that were prevalent at that time? There were senators. Okay, then there was these were leading members of the equestrian class, the respectable section of people. Those attached to great houses, unkempt lower class, and finally you had the slaves. So this is a little bit of information about the knights. These were horsemen, the equites or horsemen. A little bit about the incomes of the time. The historian Olympiodorus of the early 5th century, who was also an ambassador, tells us that aristocracy at the time in the city of Rome drew annual incomes of up to 4,000 pounds of gold from their estate, not counting the produce they consumed directly. And going on to a source-based question, the incomes of the aristocracy in the early 5th century. So we have a lot of their income that's mentioned here in comparison to others. What is solidus? It's a coin of 4.5 grams of pure gold. A little bit about Constantinople. It was the second capital, and modern day it's Istanbul in Turkey, and previously it was also called Byzantium. We have this picture-based question, statue of Emperor Constantine. Which were the polytheist religions that were followed? Roman, Italian gods like Jupiter, Juno, Minerva, and Mars, as well as numerous Greek and Eastern deities, were worshipped in thousands of temples, shrines, and sanctuaries. A little bit about the Sasanian invasion. By the early 7th century, there was a war between Rome and Iran. This was constantly flaring up, and the Sasanians, who ruled Iran since the 3rd century, they launched a wholesale invasion of all the major eastern provinces, which included Egypt, which was the greatest political revolution of the time, the expansion of Islam from its beginnings in Arabia. This could be a map question. Please look for the seas, the major cities of the countries, and if there is any kind of a water body. So you have the rivers, you have the seas, you have the Gulf, you have the countries also here. And that's all for now.